It's been a busy week and we got 3 updates for 3 different builds in today's video. We'll be taking the LD100 out for a test ride. This bike's been sitting idle for a while as we waited to put the dual CDI on it and take advantage of dual spark plugs. We found a few interesting things along the way. Then we'll move on to our first hybrid build on the gas bike frame, our Loki bike, with some upgraded parts. This bike is running fantastic and we're only dealing with one minor issue on the super clutch, which we'll talk about more in detail. And then we're moving on to a new gas bike frame. This is the Zeda Screaming Demon from bicycleengines.com, which was picked up for $470 on an overstock sale, and this will be our replacement for the Southern Customs hybrid motor, which currently nuked the back wheel on our Path Dragon. So, stay tuned, here we go. Welcome back, motorized bike enthusiasts. This video is brought to you by a random thing that has nothing to do with motorized bikes. Are you tired of seeing advertisements for Ridge wallets, Raid Shadow Lesin, ball trimmers, or NordVPN? Well, guess what? You ain't got to see that crap on this channel unless it's related to motorized bikes. But we do have some derpery at the end of the video that some of you might appreciate, so stay tuned to find out. I do apologize for any background noise you might hear as we've got a storm rolling through here to make things interesting. So first up is the LD100. Some of you might remember this as the Basset Blaster, in honor of a rather enthusiastic electric bike rider. Anyways, it's on a Cranbrook right now, and we decided to upgrade, quote-unquote, to the LD100 two-piece top end, and I'll leave a link in the description to the original video on that. At the time, we only had a single coil spark plug to run it off of, so we ran it on one plug, and it ran fine. It ran like a YD100. But we wanted to see if there was any advantage to having dual spark plugs on this cylinder. Well, maybe. But first we got to get it running, because when I put the new CDI on the bike, it wouldn't start. Now, because the bike had been sitting outside over winter over a few months, this could have been any number of things, so I didn't immediately blame the CDI. We're going to check for spark and see what we get. And this will be interesting because we'll be able to see spark on 2 plugs. Now at the moment we only have a stock style magneto in this bike, so it's not going to be giving out ample voltage, which I think is probably going to be required to get the most out of this dual spark plug setup. But when we tested it for spark, we noticed that there wasn't a particularly strong spark, but it wasn't weak either. It was, I would say, average. What I did notice is neither one of the spark plugs fired at the same time, or in any kind of order. There was definitely no pattern here. It seemed like the spark was just randomly jumping between one plug or the other, so it was just firing out of whatever it felt like firing. And I even took a bit of slow-mo footage for you guys, so hopefully you can kind of make out what's going on. Now, this is just me turning the back wheel by hand, so this is not the magneto at its peak power. So I suspect maybe you'll get both spark plugs firing when the bike is running at higher RPMs, but I'm not optimistic. I think to run this coil and get the most out of it, we're probably going to need to upgrade the magneto to something beefy. A lot more voltage may be required to get peak power out of this dual CDI, so I'll look forward to upgrading this magneto pretty soon, and the magnet as well if I can. So we know we got spark, and we know it should run off of this, so let's go ahead and clean out the carburetor. If the bike's sitting for this long, it's probably gummed up, maybe it has water in it, who knows? How to tune an NT carburetor. Step 1, put it on the bike. Step 2, start the bike. That's it. So after a bit of cleaning and some fresh gas, she fired up. I won't say she fired right up, she was a little hesitant, and that's probably the hardest it's ever been to start a bike since I've been riding these bikes. And that wasn't too bad. So might I add, no matter how many carburetors I test and enjoy in the future, I'll always have a special place in my heart for the NT carburetor. Its simplicity and all-round performance is something that just can't be beat at $10. So, let's move on to how the LD100 is doing. Well, if I'm completely honest, it's been so long since I've ridden one of these, a few months, that I can't exactly remember how it compares to the regular YD100, and I don't think there's going to be much of a difference. However, we did note that in our initial impressions video, the exhaust port on this thing is massive. The intake's quite large as well, and all around it was a relatively clean cylinder. I do suspect that with this dual spark plug head, you're going to probably want to run higher octane fuel, as I tend to notice what sounded to me like a bit of knocking. I think low-octane fuel in this head might not be the best idea. Now, generally, I don't run high-octane fuel in any of my bikes, as the compression ratio on these is pretty subpar, but there's not a lot of room in this head when you add two spark plugs. It doesn't appear to me as the profile of the dome itself has changed any over a stock YD100 jug, so keep that in mind. If you notice any knocking sound with your LD100, try and run some higher octane fuel, as it might be required. All-round performance, as far as what I can remember, is strong. This thing has great low and mid-range power, and it lacks in the top end, but we don't really have a real pipe on this, just one of those knockoff Fat Belly MZ65 clones, which I have mixed feelings about. However, I did notice in a head-to-head test against the Deluxe pipe on my Firestorm 4040, it had more low-end grunt compared to the Deluxe, or the WC80 pipe. So if bottom end is what you're going for, this pipe should do the trick with the LD100. However, it's not very well matched to the massive exhaust port on this cylinder, so a custom flange and header might be something that this cylinder can really take advantage of. Despite the minuscule amount of sealing area around the intake and exhaust for the exhaust manifold and the intake manifold, I didn't notice any leaks. No oil spit around the exhaust manifold, and after a quick and dirty leak test with some starting fluid, I didn't notice any leaks around the intake. That's not to say one won't crop up or I don't have one somewhere else on the bike, but at least as far as the intake is concerned, it seems to be doing the job for now. But that is something you're still going to want to keep an eye on, because that sealing surface is tiny. I did, however, notice that we have a head gasket leak. This is easy to fix. I'll deck the head and cylinder and mess around with different head gasket materials and get that sorted out. Sitting back down on a YD100, or now an LD100, is a nice pleasant reminder of just how much practical power you can get out of these dirt cheap motors. PK80 style motors, as well as the YD100s, will probably always be a nice fallback on the channel, even when we start messing with performance builds. Simply put, even though they're not a blessing in reliability, they have a lot less nuances when dealing with the performance motors in comparison. Something quite well summed up in this meme that floats around the motorized bike community. I can't put it better myself. Although this might not be the YD to LD100 comparison you're looking for, as far as my memory is concerned, the performance feels similar, maybe a little bit better with the LD100. But keep in mind that the main benefit of switching over to this two-piece option is because it's a two-piece option. If you don't like dealing with single-piece jugs, well, this is something that might be right up your alley. Although we do open up the door for head gasket leaks, which I'm currently dealing with, something I've never had to deal with on a YD100 jug, for obvious reasons. Inside this box is the Screaming Demon from BicycleEngines.com that I picked up on sale for $470. For the price, I think it's decent, but far from perfect. Rear horizontal dropouts and a rear caliper mount. That's nice. Unfortunately, the lower motor mount's crooked, so we'll have to Dremel these holes to let the motor sit straight. It has a dual kickstand, which is always nice to see on a motorized bike. That just makes things more convenient. Unfortunately, the gas cap is not vented or sealed, but that's an easy fix. I don't know what these are for, but I think it has these for a rear rack mount. Now it has rear rim brakes, which in many situations is convenient for motorized bikes. Unfortunately, it has mag rims. I don't like mag rims, but I'll admit I've never used them before. We'll find out how they hold up. I have sketchy roads, and I don't think that's a great option, and I don't think mag rims match well with rim brakes. Now the front fork is decent for the price. It has a lockout adjustment that I'll never use. It also has some stiffness adjustment, which I'll probably set once and leave it for the rest of its life. The box of accessories has a bike chain with no master link, so you just have to hope you get lucky with chain adjustment. The grips are nice, but one's not bigger than the other, so you're not going to be able to use the right side with your throttle unless you're using a thumb throttle. It has no instructions for the headset. I put it on the best order I could figure. This is logical to me, and it seems to match up okay, but when looking for YouTube information, there's so many variations with forks that I didn't find any useful information. Anyways, here's a bit of information about what's going on with this bike. Normally, I wouldn't consider the Screaming Demon for its original price of around $600. I don't like the combination of parts. Nor do I feel that this frame is particularly strong. So just because it's a gas bike frame, don't assume you're going to be able to put a beefy motor on it and get away with it. The build quality is not quite as good as the F-Zero, but it's decent. I think it'll handle stock and lightly modified motors just fine. I will be putting the Southern Customs Hybrid on this, which kind of contradicts what I just said. But I really don't have many other options right now, as I can't afford another F-Zero for the Southern Customs Hybrid. So when I put that motor on this bike, I won't be pushing it to its limits. It'll just be mostly for convenience rather than anything else. My biggest concern with this bike is the mag rims. If it had spoke rims, I probably would have picked one up a long time ago. It's why I've wanted the Zeda Dawn to come back in stock for so long, as it's almost a perfect setup in my opinion. And they say it might come back in stock May, so if it does, we'll pick one up. We'll make do with what we got for now and see what this bike can handle, so if it's something you're interested in, keep an eye on the channel for future updates on this particular bike, as it will have its own dedicated videos. No ride footage of this frame in today's video because unfortunately we're still putting it together. We ran into a major snag putting the rear wheel on, as there's this much space that needs to be taken up between the hub and the frame. And these frames you can't just squeeze together without causing some serious issues. Now let's get back to our performance build, the Loki bike with the Minarelli Hybrid, and see how it's been doing so far with a handful of upgrades. One major issue we caught before it was too late was the fact that the hub adapter studs were backing out. Actually, every single one of them was loose. And after reviewing some comments from some of my viewers, apparently this is very common and can happen several times. So if you run one of these setups, keep a close eye on these studs and check them regularly. Because once they pull out enough, if they don't cause a catastrophic failure while you're riding, they might damage the hub to the point where you simply need a new rear wheel set. Moving on to some of the upgrades, we're still running the stock Minarelli cylinder with its stock portwork because I want to see how much performance we get out of this before upgrading to the ported cylinder from DLH with the CNC custom head from Smolik Performance. Kind of a Romeo and Juliet thing going on there. We started by replacing the stock bottom end studs with longer ones so we could actually run the proper Minarelli head, as before we were just running the Zeda head, which is not really matched to a Minarelli, but it did work and gave us decent performance. Next, we upgraded the bucking bar that was included with our super clutch to a 65K Rockwell hardened steel bucking bar, which from what I understand is going to be included now with all of the super clutches, force clutch, and the budget clutch from DLH Performance, as there was some worry about the softer steel wearing down excessively fast. While I was at it, I went ahead and replaced the bearing, the mandrel, and the clutch cam so that if we have any previous fatigue, it won't carry over into our new system, as I'm still dealing with a clutch adjustment issue that we'll get to after these other upgrades. We now finally have a real Mikuni carburetor. We're running the VM18 with the recommended jets from LD100 Performance, and I went straight to the richest jets, so my tune is probably not perfect, but I'll tell you what, this bike cruises absolutely perfect in my opinion. I've had no heat seizure so far, and the throttle response is pretty nice. All in all, I feel like I have more performance, but I can't tell exactly what it's coming from as we did a lot of upgrades at the same time. But this carburetor is really nice, if not a little bit pricey. We went ahead and replaced our entire G2 reed assembly. It has a new block with thicker studs for a more secure seal and less likely to be stripped out. We replaced the reed cage and paddles because my old one was just not sealing right. And we also added the G2 reed stuffer from LD Performance along with the stuffing plates from DLH. So this G2 is under max stuffage. Whether or not that's a good thing, I don't know, but I do like the idea of taking up excessive volume inside of the reed, as well as providing a little bit more of a fluid transition for less turbulence. I'm also curious to see how long this 3D printed material from LD Performance will hold up to the fuel oil mixture going through it. I assume it's just going to be a normal wear item, but how long it will last is yet to be seen. I added on a fresh clutch cable and a proper trigger lock clutch lever that actually locks in the fully disengaged position. These are becoming more tricky to find. So at the moment, this bike is running fantastic. It has great power, it cruises nicely, and the idle feels much more stable than it was before. Unfortunately, I can't tell for sure because we're having a clutch dragging issue that I'm about to get into. Now, when I was putting all this back together with the upgraded bucking bar and the new parts, I used Lucas Red and Tacky, as it appears to be one of the best greases you can get for high temperature and just staying in position. I packed the ever-living crap out of the entire clutch shaft, making sure that every component was thoroughly lubricated. Now on to the main issue that I'm having with this bike. As a matter of fact, the only issue that I'm currently having with this bike, which is not something I can often say. And it's still clutch adjustment related. Now the super clutch is performing flawlessly. There's 100% no slippage that I can find when I pin the throttle on this Minarelli. So we're good there as far as performance is concerned, but unfortunately I can't keep it adjusted to where it will fully disengage. After I adjust the clutch, ride the bike for a little bit, I find that it's always dragging and I can't get a nice idle because of this drag. The motor will stall or it'll just want to keep running the bike. And I've made probably 6 or 7 adjustments so far and I still find it to be doing this. But I'm not throwing it under the bus, as this could be due to my simple lack of experience with these high pressure clutch systems. With as much pressure as there is on these components, it's very possible that I'm simply babying the adjustments, not adding quite enough at once. Although I do suspect that the stock clutch components which I'm still using, being the mandrel, bearing, and the clutch cam, might be wearing out excessively quick. At the moment, this issue is not excessive enough to prevent me from riding the bike. I'm still able to take it to work every day, but I don't like the idea of constantly having to adjust it because the stock clutch components can't handle this much pressure. Now, this is not the update video for the clutch yet. This is just an issue I'm currently dealing with, as next week, after I try a few things that might fix this problem, I'll be sure to give you guys a full update on the super clutch and my honest opinion. We covered a lot of updates in this week's video, but there's one more thing. In our Discord server, there's a video suggestion chat. If a topic gets enough interest, I try to cover it to the best of my abilities. I'm starting to regret this decision because originally that was designed for motorized bike-related content. Somewhere along the line, somebody asked me to show you how I cook a burger. And then it got a little carried away. Hey, babe. Will you show these guys how I cook a burger?
Sure. Give me a second.
Thank you. Yeah, it's getting a little out of hand.
Screen on that.
Thanks, baby.
Don't let it fall apart on you.
How is it? Season okay?
I make a pretty damn good burger.
Yes, you do. I know.
I shall call this the Burger in honor of one of our members who really wanted to see how I cook a burger.